Welcome to the Santa Clara County Civil Discourse Committee event about who decides what we teach. We hope you will find this conversation enlightening, challenging, and thought-provoking. We hope and look forward to your participation and questions. A few ground rules. Respect all participants and their views, both in the conversations as well as in the chat. Participate by being an aware part of the conversations and put your questions in the chat as we get, and we will get to as many as we can. Our conversation will be around these goals: how curriculum is determined and taught, who controls the process and potential improvements, what curriculum topics are people concerned about and why? And as a democratic society, how should we approach these topics? And who are the final arbiters of the content being taught? We'll try to accomplish these goals, and each of our panelists will present their response to our main questions for about 5 minutes each. And then our moderator will ask them questions provided earlier, followed by your questions, which I hope you will put into the chat. And finally, each of the panelists will have concluding remarks. Now, Tony Stieber will introduce our panelists. Take it away, Tony.
Thanks, Marianne. So let me start with Graham Clark. Graham is a long-term educator and administrator within the Fremont Union High School District, and he was appointed superintendent in May 2022. During the course of his 25 years in education, all of which he has spent in this school district, he has served as a high school math teacher, assistant principal, and district office administrator. In his previous position as deputy superintendent, he oversaw administrative services, the bond and technology programs for the district, and he was a leader in its efforts to implement a one-on-one technology device program and foster positive relationships with each of the district's bargaining units. Graham earned master's degrees in education and business administration from San Jose and Santa Clara University, respectively. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Santa Clara University. He's a long-term resident of the area and has worked in the school district for the past 25 years. He's also a member of Cupertino Rotary and the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce. Our next panelist is Jennifer DiBrienza, and her career began as a teacher in the New York City public school system. She spent 8 years as an elementary classroom teacher and staff developer for grades K-8. And then she became an education consultant for schools and districts in the US and internationally. In 2001, she moved to the Bay Area and began a PhD program in education at Stanford's Graduate School of Education. Since completing her dissertation in 2008, she has worked locally, teaching at the Stanford GSE, consulting for educational technology companies, and supporting teachers and administrators in schools and districts across the Bay Area. Jennifer currently serves on the Palo Alto School Board, and during her 2 terms as Palo Alto School Board President, she addressed concerns around sex education, math acceleration, transgender rights, and the Middle East conflict, and these are common community topics. Our last panelist is J. Manuel Herrera. He's a native of San Jose, an alumnus of William C. Overfeld High School, and he attended the University of Pacific and received his master's degree in urban studies from Occidental College. For more than 5 years, since July 2000, Manuel has been a program administrator for the National Conference for Community and Justice, a national human relations organization, which is now known regionally as the Silicon Valley Conference for Community and Justice. He was elected to the Eastside Union High School District Board of Trustees in 1990 and has demonstrated his leadership by chairing and serving on numerous subcommittees and in all board offices. So now we're going to begin by asking each of our panelists to address our main questions for about 5 minutes each. And those questions, as a reminder, are how curriculum is determined and taught, who controls the process and potential improvements. Second, what curriculum topics are people concerned about and why? Third, as a democratic society, how should we approach these topics? And finally, who are the final arbiters of the content being taught? So over to you, Graham, if you'd like to get the ball rolling.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me. As mentioned, my name is Graham Clark. I'm the superintendent with the Fremont Union High School District, and I just want to say I'm a former math teacher and a business teacher, and I work in a high school district. So as we talk about curriculum, I would say at the high school level, it's a little bit different than elementary level. We are single subject teachers, most of us, and so we teach either math or social studies or English, world languages. So you teach in a content area, and that's quite different from elementary grades where you're a first grade teacher or second grade teacher. My wife actually is an elementary teacher, so I would say that the questions on curriculum development are quite different in elementary. But I'll be speaking to you really from the high school level. And I think the first question there is, how is the curriculum determined and who are the arbitrators? And I will say that for all of our subject areas, we have curriculum frameworks and standards, and some of them are called Common Core or Next Generation Science Standards, NGSS. And within those standards, they sort of define what the students are to learn. And I will say the Common Core was revolutionary for us. When I think about my experience in high school, particularly in English, I used to think of it in terms of what books we read. And I can remember in junior year it was American Lit, and we read Scarlet Letter, Red Badge of Courage, Hemingway. And I think my senior year, every single book that we read was a Shakespeare novel. But actually, the curriculum really in English these days is not really, it's not about what books you read, it's about what skills you're teaching. And the skills really are, they're about close reading, they're about analysis, they're the writing, so informative, narrative, argument. We want students to learn how to synthesize and different points of view in the writing, and claims and counterclaims and how to support those. So those would be the skills that we're looking to teach in English, and that's what the standards are based on. And then the books that teachers and course-alike groups select are really determined by the teachers. In terms of the other thing that I think really has a big impact on the curriculum are our graduation requirements. So as a district, we require 220 credits, and that's composed of a lot of different courses in different departments. And of course, we require 4 years of English, 3 years of math, and so on throughout the department. So there are required courses that all students are required to graduate. But I will say, really what really determines a curriculum, I'm going to say in many respects, it is colleges. And there's something that we call the A through G requirements. And in our district, 80%, it's over 80% actually of the students, their desire is to attend a 4-year college, University of College prep. And the UC system has what they call the A through G requirements. And that determines how many courses a student needs to take in each subject area. And that would be in history, English, math, science, foreign language, world language, as we call it, visual and performing arts. And there are college electives, which are the G requirement. And it's actually, the A through G requirements requires a minimum level of coursework to be admitted. But in practice, students have to take more than that because, as we know, admission to college is very competitive. And if you only do the minimum requirements, so for instance, in science, it might say the minimum requirement is 2 years of science. If you only took 2 years, it wouldn't be likely that you would get admitted to college. You'd want to take 3 or 4. And so really, the electives become students taking more of the required courses, what I would think of as a required course. So I would say college entrance requirements really drive a lot of our curriculum. And then lastly, I'll just mention advanced placement courses. Again, advanced placement courses are a great thing for students who are wanting to get admitted to elite colleges. And as we are a district of 9,000 students, and this year we gave 12,000 advanced placement tests. And so really the juniors and seniors are the main ones that would be unlikely for a freshman really to take an advanced placement test. but that is 12,000 tests. So as you can see with our with our juniors and seniors, we have many students taking 2, 3, even 4 advanced placement tests. And so what determines the curriculum in an advanced placement course? Well, it is the requirements of that test. And so when kids take that course, they want to score a 3 or 4 or a 5 on that AP test. And so what's taught in that course is the curriculum required, hopefully, to get them to that score so they can score well and get the college credit. Because when they take it, they're hoping to score a 3, 4, or 5 to get the college credit. So I will say, in many respects, the colleges do determine our curriculum, because as a college, in our district, people are really geared towards getting into elite colleges and four-year colleges in general. And that's really what drives a lot of our curriculum choices. It's not the only thing. We do have some career technical education courses, but I will say by and large, people are looking to take college prep courses in our district, and that kind of drives a lot of our stuff. I think that's it. Oh, well, maybe I should comment on this. How is that determined? Well, the state framework and the state standards are approved at the state level, and I think there's chances for parent input there, certain staff input, all kinds of input as they approve those, and they get approved by subject area. So they're on different cycles for review and approval. So that's the process that happens at the state. The graduation requirements are, of course, approved by the Fremont Union High School District Board, and they periodically would review those. And A through G requirements. So those are approved by the UC system, and they would review those requirements periodically and add or delete from them. So most recently, I think they added F, which is the visual and performing arts requirements. That was a few years ago, but they required a course in that area. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Jennifer?
Thank you so much. My name is Jennifer. So happy to be here talking about this topic. I wanted to talk a little bit more generally about what guides my thinking when we make these decisions, whether they're about math acceleration or sex ed or COVID policies or whatnot, anything that's sort of controversial. And really those are expertise and equity. And so I don't say that like everyone's going to find it super compelling, especially folks who have an issue with wanting more parent say. But they are my guiding principles. So I'll just start by telling you a little bit about each one, and we'll have a chance to get into them more tonight. But expertise, I know, is not as popular a concept as it once was. Still is for me. Almost 90% of a school district salary budget goes to teacher salaries, right? To staff salaries. And I wouldn't say that every single teacher is necessarily an expert, but together, your whole staff that you hire to do the work are experts in the fields, especially our superintendent was just talking about at the high school level. That's certainly true. But even, at the elementary level too, they're general studies, but have a lot of expertise and experience. And then all your administrators and your TOSAs and your curriculum directors and whatnot, there's a lot of expertise. So I sort of start from the place that this is where our tax dollars are going and what we're paying for. If we aren't going to listen to them and their expertise and their experience and the research they've done, why pay them, right? But obviously you need your teachers, but to have all these extra people, I think it really guides our work and really helps us go down a good path when we listen collectively to those people that we're paying. And excuse me, I don't know if you could see my dog here, but my dog is on the table. I think the quintessential example of expertise is when COVID hit. And I'm sure anyone who had a kid in school or works at a school remembers this very well. It was somewhat traumatic. At the very beginning, we had no idea how any of this spread, what was dangerous to do, what wasn't, how to proceed. We were really in uncharted territory. And I'll speak from my point. We were a school board, 5 randomly elected people to make decisions, none of whom knew anything about infectious disease. So right away, we were being petitioned for everything from not closing to not reopening until there were vaccines, whatnot. And so we knew in our situation, we had some families who were totally fine. They were living in comfort. They had resources. Other families who were really struggling. Parents had jobs that required them to still show up in person. Some kids were home alone. Some had no food in the house. Some had no one to help them with their schoolwork. They had no Wi-Fi, no laptop. I mean, they ran the gamut. And same with teachers, right? There were some who were fine at home and comfortable and teaching from their living rooms, and others who were caring for elderly parents or the very same kids I mentioned that were home, right? They all had kids. So during a global pandemic, the experts that I wanted to listen to were the county health department, for sure. And ours, if you're in Santa Clara County, ours is Sarah Cody. She was very well regarded, very experienced, and was clearly able to acknowledge the complicated nature of the situation we were in. So our school district decided, our school board decided we were going to listen to her every step of the way. She was the expert here. And unless we wanted to suddenly become county health experts or experts in infectious disease, she was going to be her department was going to be our North Star. And so we were not able to open in the fall of 2020, even though a lot of districts did that. But sometime in October, she told us it was safe to open under a list of very specific conditions: 6 feet distancing, separators, a certain number of kids in a room. We were very lucky that we were able to follow those. We have space, we have resources. And there were some people that were very upset that we were going to reopen. They didn't feel it was safe. They were scared. They were mad. And we totally understood that. But as soon as we drifted from the guidance of the experts, then suddenly, now we were health experts. It made sense to us to stick with them. And if they said it was safe to do, we were going to trust that. And it was met with some pushback. But you know what? Over that year, we know of not a single incident of transmission. We followed all the safety protocols. Our kids were back in school. Many thought later than they should have been, and others thought sooner than we should have been. But there was no kids got sick from being in school. So we felt like that was a success. And following the experts there really mattered. In my last 45 seconds, I'll just really quickly touch on the other one, which is equity. And by that, I mean, parents often disagree and want opposite things, right? You can't just listen to parents because there's a group advocating for one thing and a group advocating for another thing. But what I try to remember is who are the ones usually advocating. This isn't always true, but often it's the wealthier parents, the ones with a higher level of education, the ones who feel comfortable communicating with us in English, the ones that feel they have a right to push back and they have a right to a voice. That's a very specific subset of parents. And I try to remind myself that there are many other parents who can't be at the meeting, who have to work, who have no childcare, who don't feel confident speaking up, who don't know that there's a meeting happening or that there's something being discussed. So I always try to remember when I'm hearing from parents or from an advocacy group that when we're being told we want X or Y, it's almost always a very small subset of all of the parents. And they're coming with a specific agenda that doesn't necessarily represent the majority or bring the latest data or evidence. So expertise and equity are my guiding principles in all this work. And I look forward to the conversation tonight.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Over to you, Manuel.
Good evening. My name is Manuel. First initial J. Manuel Herrera, trustee with the East Side Union High School District. And I just want to offer a little more context on instruction and curriculum in public education. Let me just see here. In the 90s, through polling and focus groups, education leaders learned that the public was willing to support more funding for public education if there was a curriculum that was stronger on back to basics instruction. That was number one. Number two, if there was more choice offered in public education, which led to legislation that created charter schools. And number three, increased safety on our campuses and our classrooms. We took funding measures, put them on the ballot statewide, and they did pass. I'm going to abbreviate my remarks here. We went through many years of a focus, an extreme focus on testing to gauge the progress of our schools, and this ultimately was judged as overly rote memorization that co-opted instruction purely to teaching to the test. And what then evolved over time was a greater emphasis on instruction and curriculum that promoted critical thinking skills and working and learning in teams. It led to what was called differentiated teaching styles, recognizing that students learn in different ways. They don't all learn the same way. And it also it also led to more investments in training for teachers, professional development. In the East Side, our basic commitment is that all students will graduate prepared for college and career. And we have a very diverse district. By the way, we're the largest high school district in Northern California. And we have a global community here. 52 primary languages are spoken by our students, where English is not their primary language. And we have the whole economic spectrum within our boundaries, about 500,000 residents within our boundaries. And we have older neighborhoods, working class, some poverty neighborhoods. We have very middle class neighborhoods. We have very upper class neighborhoods. And so within all of that, we're looking to serve, a very diverse community. Interestingly, our school board, there's 5 members. There are 3 women and 2 men. There are 2 Latinos and 2 Asian and 1 white, which is a beautiful little snapshot of the demographics of the district. The place where curriculum and instruction and textbook matters converge is in our district, in the Instructional Policies Committee, IPC. We just call it IPC, the Instructional Policies Committee. And it has as its membership the associate principal for education from each school site, 1 teacher from each school site, all the subject area coordinators, those are the ones at a district level that are coordinating a specific subject area, be it English, math, social sciences, or social studies, or so on. All subject area coordinators are on the Instructional Policies Committee. We have the chairperson of the Teachers Union Curriculum Committee, which is the East Side Teachers Association. And then finally, we have the associate superintendent just a minute, please. We have the associate superintendent who is the chair of this Instructional Policies Committee. Now, just to give you an example, that the IPC has forwarded to us several recommendations, which they've been working on for some time. It just happens that they're on the agenda for tomorrow in our board meeting. And an example of what has been coming through is approving piloting a course in electronic music, digital music, piloting or permanent adoption of a sports medicine and athletic training, another one on juvenile justice, and then on constitutional law, a pilot course, an introduction to information technologies. You get the picture. We're not out there on the fringes of societies where a lot of the intense conversations are going on, but just basically in the functioning of a school district. There's a course on the character of leadership that is approved by the IPC for a pilot course, and we go through processes of reviewing and then approving pilot, and then getting to a decision on permanent adoption. And where the community has more access, or if they want to be more involved, is when the superintendent forwards recommendations to the board, and that's a time for community comment. And the board will often, if there's a lot of community concern or issues with the recommendations, we'll pull it off the agenda and we'll go back and engage in another process of interacting with our community. And they have a voice when they want to have a voice. So I'll just add, I'll leave it there, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Now we're going to have the panelists each respond as they wish to a series of questions that have been put together by other people. And after that part, we'll open the floor to your participant questions. Okay, and Ellen is going to manage that process. Ellen?
Hi, thank you to all of the speakers. We have these additional questions we want to have your response to. And the question, you should be deciding who would like to go first, but the question is, what criteria should be used to decide which topics are included in curricula? What approach should the decision makers take? How should they make their decisions? What criteria should they use? Who wants to go first?
I'll just start out with a brief comment and leave it to the other two who are educators, active educators. We work within a framework of state mandated instruction and standards by which we develop our instructional materials. It's not like it originates with us, you know, and in 2010, 2011, something called Common Core swept the nation that was setting benchmarks for what students ought to be learning in English language arts or in math, especially those two areas. And by the way, when something like this is afoot, it usually takes years for it to be embraced, adopted, and Common Core swept the nation within months. It swept state after state after state. It turned out that Bill Gates had taken an interest and pumped more than $200 million into promoting, you know, and localizing the efforts to advocate for it, for its adoption. So that's what, you know, when someone with resources steps into a picture, things can happen more quickly. I'm going to leave it there.
I mean, my answer is pretty similar, is that it's not like we create this from nowhere. Certainly when we were all students, and even when I first started teaching in the 90s in New York City, there was a lot more flexibility, right? Which standards are you using for math? Are you using the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics? Or are you using something else? Are you making your own? Oh, there's all these different curricula. Some are back to basics and some are conceptual, and you know, there's a wide variety of options. And like he said, in around 2011, I started to sweep through in 2008, and even then, even by 2010, that's still super fast for something like that. And now, even if we want to do a new curricular adoption, there are very specific standards that we need to follow. And almost all of the published books, textbooks, and other resources that are out there are completely aligned with the Common Core. So I mentioned math both because it's my area of expertise and because it is very controversial. Your staff will propose a particular curriculum, and some people will be very happy and some people will be very upset. And they both meet Common Core state standards, right? So, but there is, you know, the internet and word of mouth, and things get reputations, and people get very concerned. Oh, if my kid learns this, are they really going to learn? Is there not enough basics in it, or is there, you know, too much of something else in it? So we do, our staff does investigate, often pilot and adopt, but they all really meet the Common Core or other state standards.
Okay. Thank you. And
I think I'll just echo on what the other panelists have said, but you know, there's standards and there's frameworks, and I just tend to think of them actually by subject area. And so like when were they approved in math, or when were they approved in science or in social studies? And so the state reviews those and publishes frameworks and standards on a different cycle. So just looking at the most recent list, it looks like math was last approved in 2023. English language arts in 2014, science, the new generation science standards were, or next generation science standards was in 2016. So they're on a different cycle. And then when those new standards come out, I will say teachers analyze them. And we have course like groups at our sites. We also have departments. So there's an English department, a science department. They'll analyze the standards and make sure that the textbooks and the materials that we're using align with those, and they will adapt them as necessary. So in some cases that might be adopting a new textbook. In other cases, it would just be modifying the lessons they have to meet the new standards. And you know, publishers, when new standards come out, they do publish new textbooks. They will update their curriculum so that it matches the new state standards after, a period of time. But I will say that really the work that teachers do is they work together in course-like groups, and they do that at our district on a weekly basis. We have time set aside for them to do that, and so they analyze that. But they also do that during the summer. That's part of their summer work where they plan their lessons for the year, and they continually look at that. And it's an iterative process, right? Because they analyze how well students have done meeting those standards, and then they revise their assignments and their lessons based on student performance. So that each year they go through that process, and they look at how students are learning and how they're what they're mastering and which concepts, and they'll modify their lessons for the following year.
One other quick note, interesting how we talked about how money plays a role, and also politics, because the largest states are Texas and California. Largely, like we said, Common Core was adopted by most states, but there are some topics that are adopted state by state, vary state by state. And the state of Texas probably has the biggest influence over the textbooks that we see. If Texas decides to do something, most publishing companies will adopt that. And then suddenly all of your options have that Texas did, right? There's not a whole lot of difference. Same happens with California sometimes. But I think that sometimes our options are limited because of what some of these big states do and the impact it has on the big publishing companies.
I want to add a postscript here that an example or two of locally initiated curriculum efforts were the Chinese American community approached the administration and the board asking for courses to be introduced in Chinese language instruction, specifically in a certain dialect of that. And they were willing to raise resources to provide in school instruction to supplement. And then more recently, the Vietnamese community had requested some language instruction in Vietnamese. And when the recommended textbook was brought forward, it turned out to be very controversial because the company was based in Vietnam, which the local Vietnamese community views as a communist, society. And they rejected it. They protested. They filled the chambers of the board saying, no, no, no. And now we're back to the drawing boards to put together our own textbook or try to find another one. But these things happen locally with local initiative.
Thank you. That's kind of exactly what we wanted to know, is where do these mandates and from federal and state and locally, who makes the decisions?
Well, in general, I'm going to say we work off the state standards and state frameworks, so that's made at the state level. But then, the local school boards will also staff will bring forward requests to purchase textbooks or supplemental curriculum, and those are approved at the local school board level. But that curriculum and those textbooks, it needs to be aligned to whatever the state standards are in that subject area. And I would say that's an ongoing process. Each year we have requests to buy new textbooks and supplemental textbooks, and that's something that gets reviewed each year.
Okay, thank you. Now, our next question is, should civics, citizenship, have more emphasis in the curriculum? And should it get more of your time? What is mandated now by California? And how can you squeeze in one more course? Should the school year be extended? Do we really need 3 years off in the summer?
3 months.
3 months. I'm happy to start with that one.
Oh, yeah,
okay, go ahead.
Hey, well, I'll just say we're a civics education, so I'm going to say directly it's found at the senior level. We have government, American government classes and econ classes, and I would say it's addressed with seniors in the social studies department. But I would also say it's addressed as you're studying U.S. history in the 11th grade. You're going to be covering a lot of topics too, and possibly actually also in 11th grade in world world history. And in English classes, you might read books. They might select a book that's on that topic. So I would say civics education is directly taught at the 12th grade level in government classes, but it's throughout the curriculum. And I would say one of the questions you asked there is about adding a course. And so that's an interesting question because as I think of, we're struggling with that a little bit right now. We are adding a new course called Ethnic Studies, and it's a new required course. And I think the challenge is when you add a course, what is it that you're not taking, or you know, and so you have to. It's a required course, and then the first question is at what grade level, and then if kids are taking a certain number of classes at that grade level, in order to take an extra one, you've got to give them an extra section, or they have to take something in lieu of that. So like, what would their choice be? And so, as we were talking before, there are A through G requirements, and those are the requirements to get into college. And they're a minimum, but many kids will take more than the minimum level of those courses. So their elective becomes an extra science class or an extra math class, or some extra college elective. And if you put another required course in their curriculum, that will be one course that they can't take. And so that makes people nervous because they have departments, and we value as a district a comprehensive education, which means we want students to take art, we want them to take music, we want them to take business, drama classes, athletics, and all of those things. And so if they don't have enough classes in their schedule, we add more required classes, they don't have enough time to take some of those optional courses, which we really value. So that's the struggle that we're going through as a district, and we're trying to figure out how do we add the requirement and still allow them that broad, comprehensive, and keep all those elective classes, current, or full. I will say, just keep them.
So right now you're struggling with adding the ethnic studies.
Yeah, and I would say when you add a class,
Mhm.
and unless students can take more classes, and that's it. We're fortunate as a district, we do offer a 7-period day, and kids can take 7 courses, but not every student wants to. There's some students 6 courses is enough, and as you get older, seniors tend to take less courses than freshmen, and that's just part of it. And the seniors a lot of times will take 5 courses. They could take 6 or 7, but they just choose. They've got all the credits they need to graduate, and they're happy to take less courses, right? So
Ones who are closest to college, but they take less.
And applying for college as the senior, that's a very time-consuming thing, and activities can be very time-consuming. So sometimes, although you could take more courses, the student might say, "No, I've got enough credits, I'm just going to take 5."
Okay, Manuel or Jennifer?
Jennifer.
Okay.
Well, since I work at a K-12 district, the beginning of that civics, I mean, hopefully there is some talk about not only physics, but just how you have difficult conversations, right? You're always working through differences of opinion, differences of perspective. And I think elementary teachers are uniquely good very often at facilitating those conversations for young kids. But in late elementary school, usually 5th grade, could be 4th or 5th, students learn about California. They learn a lot about California, but one of the things they learn about is the government. And they learn about 3 branches of government. They learn about our executive. They learn about the 2 houses of the legislative branch and the Supreme Court. So they start to, even though it's about California, later when they come back and they learn about the federal government, they see the parallels are not new to them. They're familiar with them. And then again, in middle school, we've got some work in the middle school years. And then as he said, again, in government. And I was thinking US history as well. Do I think we could do more in this day and age? I feel like it's become very clear that there is more that we should be doing. It's just a different world, right? With social media, with fake news out there, with people coming with different facts, really understanding how to work together to pass laws, to advocate for what you believe in, but respect that other people have a different. We've gotten away from that. I'm sure that there have been times in history where we've been really far from that. Right now, it feels like we're really far from that. I share Graham's concern about adding new classes. We as a school board are not excited when new classes are added. Ethnic studies has been easy for us because a long time ago, before I was on the scene, our school district said, okay, A to G requirements don't require 4 years of social studies, but we are going to. So we already had 4 years of social studies built into our curriculum. So we just worked with the social studies teachers to reduce by a semester, which we had that wiggle room. So now there's a semester less of what there was before, and ethnic studies plops in there. So it was easier for us. But if you said, hey, let's add a civics class, one of the things that has always concerned me is that as a well-resourced district, we've been privileged to have a lot of electives and options. And if you don't leave kids any time to take them, what good is it that they're there when kids are just filled up on all of the core academic classes? And as Graham has talked about a couple of times, the race to college is real. And I'd like it to be toned down. But when you see the low acceptance rates for competitive colleges and parents are nervous, students are nervous, it makes teachers very nervous. And there is a large focus on making sure that your transcript is as strong as it can be. And as soon as you add something like social emotional learning or civics, that's not something that's going to add on to your GPA. As a parent of kids right now, I say, I don't care, but there's a lot of parents that do care. So it's always a struggle.
Mm.
Yes. Gosh, I just blanked on the originating question.
Well, it's about should we offer more civics
Okay.
citizenship?
Okay, so yeah, as has already been mentioned, in our district, our social studies curriculum has, American government classes and basic instructions on civics, and it's always helpful to add more instruction, but the challenge always is the availability of instructional minutes. It's like, there's a limited amount of time that you can have a teacher in a classroom doing instruction. And, even if we extended the school year, the number of topics that people advocate for, there's just no end. Mindfulness, financial literacy, when you're talking about the whole child, you're talking about a lot of things that they need instruction and support in and so on. But how many minutes do you have left? Especially given that professional development, that is the time that teachers have to also give to their training, their ongoing training, factors into all of that. So there's a limit. We're always talking about priorities and trade-offs and choices, on all of this. So that's all.
Yeah. And Ellen, maybe I could just comment on the extended school year. I know I didn't mention that, but in some ways, the summer break, I view it as about 10 weeks, actually. And I will say, but it's also, I would think it's an alternate way of learning. And I will say, as a district, we don't talk about it a lot, but we do offer a summer academy or a summer school program. And I would say that's 6 weeks long. And that's a very valuable program for between 800 to 1,000 students every year. We're a district of just over 9,000. But that's an important time for kids that maybe got behind or didn't get the score or the grade that they wanted in that class. And it's a good way for them to make that up and keeps them on track for graduation or whatever. So for that group of students, they are still going to school, but it's a summer school format, right? But there's a lot of learning that goes on. The kids that are going to camps or their part-time jobs or even just family vacations. And that's a different kind of learning, but I think it's an important time for those type of different experiences to happen. I mean, you can learn a lot from a part-time job that you're not necessarily going to learn being in class, but those are important ways to do too. And we have band camps. A lot of athletic teams do conditioning and things like that. So those are all things that happen during the summer. And on the back end side of it, I'll just say, as a person who's worked in the school district for a long time, we use those 10 months to do what we call deep cleaning tasks that we don't do during the regular school year. And we do maintenance and modernization. And so we will go through entire wings of a school campus and modernize that whole wing during 10 weeks. And it's very planned out, but we actually need that time. And it's stuff that we just could not really do during the school year. So it's valuable time for us on the backside.
On a practical level.
I want to add a comment on extending the school year. And that is, that's just giving more time to task or more time to teach or what have you. But there's another element to to that line of thinking. Basically, the inequities in funding for public education. One example is that the Mountain View Los Altos School District is funded at about $24,000 per student. My district, very diverse, economic ranges from poverty to upper class. My district is funded at exactly half, $12,000 per student. And we could accomplish a hell of a lot more with more resources if we had the funding. So before we even talk about extending the school year, let's talk about, solving this inequity that exists, really huge inequities in public education funding.
Well, we have a lot more really good questions, but we need to move on, I'm afraid. Thank you so much.
And do we want to start with the participant questions? Karen?
Yes, please. There are several interesting questions. I'll try to get them a little more succinct as I go. The first one is, by building the curriculum around skills development rather than content, the freedom of choice of materials and contexts of a teacher grows, which is a great way to empower our teachers. As any of us teachers have their personal biases. How do districts monitor and ensure teachers' personal biases and opinions, parentheses, political or otherwise, don't ensure that they don't overshadow the principles of critical thinking and safety for our students? Any one of you want to?
I'm happy to start it. I'll take it first. It's such a great question. And, one of the things I'm reminded is a good friend of mine said to me a long time ago when we were talking about, are you biased? Are you biased? And he said, to have bias is human, and to acknowledge that bias is humane. That of course we all have bias. So the idea that we would somehow keep bias out of the classroom or out of our homes or out of our, whatever, we all have biases that we bring for whatever that wealth of experiences are. And I think that the real key to making sure it doesn't have a huge impact on the experience of the kids is by acknowledging it, by recognizing it, and by being aware of it when you're teaching. And remembering that a teacher's job, I say our job, is not to be that political, right, to have that political slant, but to teach them how to think and to evaluate on their own. So the work that our district has been doing has not been focused on, don't say this, don't say this, don't say this. It's been focused on our own biases. And we all have them, and we have them for different groups of people or for different ideas or for different whatever. And so how can we work together to make sure we're really aware of our biases so that when we're lesson planning and we're teaching, we are really thoughtful about how we are framing different issues. Is it perfect yet? No, we're not. I don't know that it ever gets perfect. But I think it's been a really good use of our time and has helped us get away from like, ooh, this issue, that issue. It's more general. It's a more holistic approach.
Manuel or Graham?
Sure. Maybe I can say, Manuel, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm yielding to you, Graham. I'm not going to comment on this.
Yeah. Hey, what I will say, so the question there is, if it's skills, how do you make sure that you're covering, biases? So one of the things that we look at as a district is the perspective, whose story are we telling and what perspective. And, I always think of it by content area, right? So this might come up in some subject matters more than others, but let's just look at English and the English standards. The new standards are more skill-based. And so you're teaching argumentative writing, you're teaching analysis. And so in order to do that, you do have to read material that has, more than one side to it. And that's where you make the argument. You make claims and counterclaims and do analysis on that. But I will say, as teachers, they work together in groups. We call them PLCs or personal learning communities, and they grapple with this. What is the right voice? What are the right perspectives in the books that we pick? Because the standard doesn't really tell you which book to pick or which reading to bring into class. It tells you what the skill is you need to teach, but then it's the decision of your teachers and they're looking for diverse perspectives. And I think back in my experience in English, all the authors we had came from the same perspective. I mean, my senior year, I think every book I read was Shakespeare. I don't think there was anything else other than that. But they look for it. Can we bring a broad perspective of resources and books and material in there for students to read and analyze it? And that's part of it. And we do have a board policy and administrative regulation on controversial issues. And one of the things that we ask staff to do is, can you make sure if you're presenting something that's controversial, try to present both sides, or if there's many sides, more than one side, not just one side of it. And I think good teachers, that's what they endeavor to do. They have to teach something that's controversial in order to do an argumentative skill-based lesson. There has to be something there to argue about, but they try to do it in a professional way.
Okay, and then the next two together here. How often do you get people trying to ban books, censor teachers, or fight for topics which they believe are essential, but someone else might believe are just to promote their agenda? And sort of part two, hearing about a few parents can demand that books be removed from school libraries makes me wonder how that happens. What if other parents want these books to be available to their and other students?
I'll make a brief comment to start. The overall approach we take is not to ban, books, but rather to make them accessible, have opt-out options, to know that, for example, long ago we had a moment of community debate on the teaching of Huckleberry Finn because of the liberal use of the N-word. And long story short is that we ended up deciding it wasn't going to be a required reading or course, but it could be opted into, and only if a teacher was specially trained, for how that would be presented. Otherwise, it was going to be made available in the library for anybody who wanted to have access to it, but we weren't going to ban it. And, with different topics and different subject matters and textbooks or instructional materials, we just take that approach. It is available as secondary material, of which if you want to access it's available, or you can choose not to, engage it, or you can choose to opt out, for your child. Thank you.
I think one of the issues we're grappling with that too is we're a district, and I think many we're on a one-to-one program. And what that means is either students bring a laptop or a Chromebook or something to school, or we provide one for them. But every student comes to school, and the expectation is that you have access to that during your class because you'll use it. But when we talk about banning books, I mean, I think we still have libraries and we have books in those libraries. But when you think about the resources that are available on the internet, the banning of the book is different. Like, because if you have access to it on the internet, if you don't have the physical book in the library, you could still access it, right? So I think it's we filter inappropriate websites. I will say that on the school internet, we don't allow that, and we have filtering systems in place for that. But banning books is not something that comes up a lot. I will say what comes up in certain times is could be books. It could be occasionally a teacher might show a segment of a movie that's an R-rated movie. We do require that people get permission slips for that if you're going to show that part of the movie. And why would a movie be R-rated? Probably it's violence, language, or sexual content. One of those three things probably gets the R rating. But if the teacher wants to play that movie in that class and it's R-rated, they got to get a permission slip, right? So occasionally people won't allow that, but it's not too common that happens. Every once in a while, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's common.
I'd say my different perspective is that we're K-12 again. So there are definitely times that, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not every board meeting or every other board meeting, but a couple of times a year, something pops up. We have had people in our district raise concerns about some books. We haven't had any banning situations. The current board would not ban it, and our administration would not advocate banning it. But if you take a look at, say, at elementary school, say a kinder or first grade classroom, a book about some LGBTQ issue, I will remind everyone that our first job is to make sure that we create a conducive learning environment for children. And that means it has to be welcoming and safe. And name any situation in our that you can, and it's in our schools, right? There are kids who have two moms or have two dads. There are kids who identify as trans. There are kids, I mean, name it. And there is a child that fits that description in our schools, in our elementary schools, kindergarten, first, second grade. So the idea that we would not let a book be there that reflects their experience, and even worse, make it known that this book has something wrong with it and cannot be in our libraries or cannot be talked about or read aloud, sends a very clear message to the student that their situation isn't okay. There's something wrong with it. And that makes it harder for a student to feel like this is their community and they are a part of it. So just at the elementary level, I think even there, we wouldn't ban anything. There are books in the library, and one of the, I guess both of them really mentioned it, that for every book that anyone has raised concern about, there's another parent that wants their child to have access to it and other children to have access to it and do not want them banned. So again, it's that parents' rights. Well, whose rights, right? What are we talking about? So I think that we have had situations, Huckleberry Finn, same conversation, right? And it was actually our students of color who said, we don't want this to be a focal point of our English curriculum anymore. Sure, of course, have it in the library, but we don't want to spend a month talking about it. And so that's exactly what happened. It's still available, nothing's banned. And in this day and age of internet, it seems really silly to try to ban something. The other topic that comes up a lot, not a lot, but occasionally, is sex education and parents being concerned about. California has very explicit sex ed standards. They are inclusive, which means it's not just man, woman, biological sex. There's all kinds of sex that teens and adults might engage in. And the reason why that is a state law is because research has shown, and the data shows, that the more inclusive your sex ed curriculum is, the safer kids are. The lower incidence of pregnancy, the lower incidence of STI, the lower incidence of assault. There's fewer consent issues that come up. So if you are keeping kids safer in all those ways, it makes sense to teach those things. Some parents opt out, but when parents come and say, you shouldn't teach this, it's too explicit, it's too seductive, it's too this or that. One, it's state law, so it makes it easier. But also the data are clear. And when there's, it's the expertise, right? The data show us that it is safer for kids to know this information. So parents can opt out one-on-one, but we include it.
Marianne, how much time do we have for more questions from our audience?
You can include as many as you want to. We have about 10 more minutes.
7 minutes. Okay.
10.
What? Sorry. 7 minutes left.
Don't we go to 8:30?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But there's another segment after the participant questions.
Okay, so let me get through a
For
couple
your final words.
Okay, I'll try to go quickly through a couple more that I hear that I think are interesting. In response to the discussion about civil discourse, the government and even AP government courses teach students about the structure of the federal government. What is missing is teaching them about local government and how to exercise their basic right and obligation, that is, how to vote. Anybody want to?
The League of Women Voters is really good at that. In our district, they come in and they get everyone registered and make sure they know. And it might be, I mean, I think we're in probably the smallest city of the cities, but I think a lot of people know the elected officials. A lot of people know, lawn signs go up. So I think it might be a little bit easier than in a very big district that covers several cities. So there's different local elections going on. Certainly the importance of voting, I hope, is taken care of in government class. But to have such an engaged populace, I think really helps kids know what's going on.
Yeah, I'll say, government, class for us is a semester course, and it's paired with another course called Econ, and it's a senior year. And so it's a lot of material to cover in one semester. There's the federal government, state government, local government, and a lot of different things to talk about in that class. So one semester is tight. I will say We do try to register students to vote as part of that class. And then in election years, I think it's more interesting for them because there's more emphasis, and off years, maybe less so. And kids do turn 18 as their seniors, so it's a perfect time. A lot of them are 17, but many of them will turn 18 during their senior year, so it's a good time to get them registered. And I think the rules on registration changed where you could sign up early, and we do promote that in our government classes. And what I will say about that, I will say many teachers in that content area, they have a lesson where they encourage students to write letters. And I will say they write letters to their local congressman, to their city council person, to their local board member on the FEHST board. We get letters. And so we at that time of the year when they're teaching that lesson, we do get hundreds of letters and we try to respond to them. And they're good ideas, and they're a class assignment, but it's also a lesson in civics. If I write a letter to my local elected leader with a good idea, how will they respond? So I think I have seen that.
I didn't, for several years, for 14 years, I was adjunct professor at San Jose State University, teaching a class on exercising influence in the public process that went beyond Civics 101. It was kind of an inside look because I'd had a career in which I started out as an activist and then became an entry-level staff person in local government, then a middle manager, then an executive manager, and then an elected official. So I kind of have a dimensional sense of public dialogue, public decision-making, and so on. And this class was really popular. And I actually, I'm just having the thought, wow, I wish I could teach some version of this to our high school students because it is fairly advanced. There's a lot of things that people do not understand about how public decisions work. There are 5 phases to the public policymaking process. There are ways in which input is solicited, and ways in which you can insert yourself without anybody's permission and have a voice, and so on. So, yeah.
Let me see here, another one. This is maybe a kind of off the cuff one. Do you see AI threatening individual learning?
I don't feel knowledgeable enough yet about that topic, so I'm not going to offer any comment here.
Our district just finished a year-long AI committee that was mostly made up of students because we figured students know way more than we do. There are a couple teachers, but a lot of students on it and a couple of administrators. And they really did some good work on it. They really talked about how AI might be used. The conversation was interesting. I was a elementary school teacher in the 90s and in New York City. And when it reminded me of the conversations we had about calculators. Oh no, stop the calculators, don't let them in. It's going to stop kids from thinking. It's very similar, right? And what they said was, 1, you can't stop it, it's coming. But 2, we can think of ways we can use it, right? The good thing about calculators is that, yeah, we want you to know that 8 times 7 is 56. But if for some reason you don't know that, you forget that, you're having trouble with that, a calculator can help you know it so you can move on to the more cognitively demanding problem, right? It opens up a door where before you didn't have it, you couldn't even engage in the really meaty problem because you had no way of figuring this out. And that was sort of their conclusion about AI, that, yeah, there should be guardrails around it. You can't get an assignment that says write a 5-paragraph essay, put it into AI and hand it in. But as an assignment in school, perhaps a teacher could say, okay, we'd all like to write essays about X. Let's start out by asking AI to write something for us and see what we come up with. Because that's going to be a pretty basic, maybe kind of sophomoric at this point. Maybe it'll get better, but right now it seems like it's maybe a 4th grade writing level. Let's see what it gave us. How can we make this better? What makes this a more compelling essay? Let's take the bare bones that AI kicked out and let's make an amazing essay and think about what points are missing. How can we make it stronger? Is this the vocabulary we want? And so it sort of shifts a little bit what the requirement is. But instead of making it this big taboo thing, oh no, don't use AI. It's okay. How can AI be helpful? And how much better are we right now than AI that we can use all these improvements? They also talked about it in math, that if you're stuck on a math problem and can't figure it out, you can ask AI for the answer and to explain to you how it did it. Or you've now got the answer and can you work backwards and figure out what the thinking was? So it's possibly an opportunity to really give you a chance to do some real critical thinking.
Yeah, I'd say Jennifer's answer, it resonates with me. I was a math teacher too in the 90s, and we did have a lot of big fights about use of calculators, if it was cheating or not cheating, and we would make people put them away and things like that. And actually, when word processing software came out, I would say it's the same thing. A grammar checker and a spell checker wasn't fair at the start, but now we just all assume those are regular tools that everyone has access to. But I would say we have been doing a lot of PD on that subject. And when we first heard about AI, I can recall there were some calls in our district by staff, we should ban those sites and block those sites so they can't be used. And then we quickly learned that as soon as we would do that, people would find a way around it. It was hard to do that. But I think, by and large, we're evolving to, it's a tool that we need to teach people how to use appropriately. And teachers have to be clear on when you can use it and when you can't use it. And that's part of the academic honesty. This assignment, you can use AI and then you have to edit it from there. That gives you a draft, but there might be other assignments where that's not allowed. And I think just clarity around that is important. And those are things we're working on. But I think people are embracing it as this is the future. You can't stop it. So you have to learn how to work with it.
Okay, going on. We are seeing some very fraught situations in school districts in other states around cultural topics. Do you see this becoming a spreading danger in California? Or these situations be confined to a few districts like Sonoma, Temecula, etc.? How would you address such situations if they came into your district?
I'll start there. We have a liberal-oriented, progressive-oriented demographic here in East San Jose. Both center right and center left, and we have just not had the culture wars come to our district, and yet I always find it to be an opportunity to learn beyond stereotypes, to learn beyond generalities communicated through media. If there's genuine advocacy in the district on any particular topic, I'm disposed as one member of the board to sit down and go deeper in a conversation to understand, and because right now people can come to a meeting, if something is not on the agenda, they have 2 minutes to make remarks. Another thing that we've evolved, which has evolved through my prompting, is that when there is a topic of great community interest, whether it be by teachers or by parents or by other advocates, we create what we call a study session, and it's like a focus group. We have sitting at the table the primary advocates and voices, pro and con, on a topic, and we have an audience that can observe, and at the end of the meeting, they can add questions and have them answered that weren't covered in that. But we go deeper. We actually get into dialogue, and there's the board has an opportunity to develop its line of inquiry and what have you. It's a lot of what I'm energized by is dialogue, public conversations. Really seeing each other and respecting each other. So. I'm not afraid of any topic coming to our district, but we just haven't had them, come at us with like culture war energy.
So culture war energy is in Santa Clara County. I know not everybody is from right here. I think most are, but Franklin McKinley School District in San Jose. I have watched on Zoom several of those board meetings. And there is this culture, there's some culture war stuff. I feel like most recently, the advocacy has been around religious issues. It has been we deserve religious freedom, and you are saying that the teacher can call a student by this new name they want to and these new pronouns, and that goes against my religion. And there's a lot of anger in those rooms. I haven't watched in a couple weeks, so I don't know if things have calmed down. The school year ends, that usually happens. But it's in the county, and so I think that some of us are just kind of aware and watching. I do agree that anyone can come and have 2 minutes and say whatever the heck they want during open forum. It's one of the scary things because sometimes people say very hateful, offensive things. But that is the law, right? They're allowed to say what they want for 2 minutes. And what I fall back on at this point, when I've heard a lot of the Franklin McKinley comments, is that we have a legal obligation, right? There are standards we have to teach. We are obligated to create a safe and welcoming environment for all students. And so we are going to do the things necessary to make those things happen, to meet the standards and to make it safe and welcoming. And if someone doesn't like that, maybe they can opt out of a particular thing if it's very specific. If it's maybe general, then perhaps the public schools aren't the place for someone that has very strong feelings about not making some kids feel welcome, right? It's our legal obligation. So as a board member, I mean, I enjoy the conversation, the back and forth, hearing different perspectives. But what it comes down to for me is this is not an option for us. We need to create a welcome and safe environment for all kids. So that means certain things we can't ban, or we can't insist on, or we can't refuse to do.
Yeah, when I listen to really what parents, what they're looking for from the school, I mean, they want their students to be safe at school. They want them to be happy at school. They want us to provide, interesting and engaging activities, sports, marching band, robotics, and all those things. And they want curriculum that gets their students into four-year colleges, elite colleges. And I think a lot of the comments that we have are around those themes when they feel like, hey, we're not meeting one of those themes. And, we have values that the belief that all kids can succeed with challenging curriculum and things like that. As long as we're tracking along those values and meeting those needs, I would say most parents that's where their emphasis is. I in the area of curriculum, I haven't really found there to be a lot of culture wars. A lot of times their comments will come up when they think we're falling down in one of those four areas, and they would bring that to our attention. We said, you need to do better in this area, and that's what the comment's about.
There's, I think, one more closing question, and then I'll hand it back over to Tony. This is just sort of by way of some kind of summary for what we've been discussing. What is the most effective way to address parental concerns about topics taught?
Well, I'll start with that. I think we would encourage a parent that has a concern, their first conversation probably ought to be with the teacher and just clarifying what was that. And that's usually a good way to start. And then a lot of times just talking about, hey, why are you covering that lesson? And the teacher can give you good perspective. And I would say that's probably the best way to start.
I would agree. I think a lot of times it's concerns. You're talking about their kids, right? You're talking about parents, kids. There's nothing more important, right? They want to protect them. They want to make sure that they're safe, like you said, Graham. So a lot of times when they come with a concern, it's fear-based, right? They're worried that we're going off the rails, or we're teaching something that doesn't align with their thinking, or they don't understand something, and that's scary too. So I think really having that conversation and trying to better understand what their concerns are and what the teacher's goal is. And you find that very often there isn't anything to be worried about. That is the case now with many of the topics that we have. And once in a while, a parent is still concerned, but I think a majority of the concerns get resolved by just having a conversation.
Yeah, and what I have found is that deep listening goes a long ways. When you just honor people, see them, hear them, mirror back the sense and feeling of what they're saying. I forget the name of the senator who called it eloquent listening. There's not enough listening in the public square. People just are talking at each other, across each other, with generalities and simplicities and so on. And we could actually grow as a community and individually as human beings if we just took the time and effort to really listen. Things can change in your perception with that practice. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a very apt last comment from speaking to the ones that we were asked. And now back to Tony.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that discussion. And we're coming to our last segment. And if if our three panelists, if you'd like to each speak for somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes on your conclusions, the kinds of actions we should take or directions we should go in, what your thoughts are, that would be great. And by the way, if you'd like to leave your chat windows open, I can sort of give you an idea of the timing. So who would like to start? You want to just do the order, Graham, and then Jennifer and Manuel?
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you and participate in the panel. I will say, just kind of in summary, so if I were to say, what is the main driver of curricular, at least curriculum in high school, I am going to tell you it's really the colleges. The colleges define what kids need to know in order to get into college, and then we try to provide that. And it's a competitive process. So if you just provide students the minimum, they're not going to make it in. It's a competitive thing, and you want to provide them the best opportunity to get into the colleges that they want to get into. So that really, I would say, is the main driver for us. But beyond that, we want kids to have wellness. We want them to feel cared for. We want them to feel safe in school. So they're all those areas. We provide activities, sports, and all those programs so they can have a well-rounded education. And I will say one of the things that we're working on as a district, and I think there's a few examples of it, but there are good topics that come up and they're actually not part of a required course that we have. And I'll give you an example of what we're thinking about. As a district, we've decided that we want to be a green ribbon school district, and that means an emphasis on environmental issues, climate change, sustainability. We applied for the green ribbon award with the state. And what it requires really is there needs to be practices and there needs to be facility things that are good for the environment, meaning we're reducing energy and reducing water consumption and reducing our carbon footprint. And those are practices and facility issues. But there's also curriculum issues. And there are things that all students should know and learn about climate change, things that they should learn about sustainability, things that they should learn about recycling. And I will say students are very interested in this. We've had a committee working all year long. They're passionate about this because I think the world that they're going to inherit for us, they can see it changing. They can see it's getting hotter. The fires are more extreme and there's flooding. And where exactly does a curriculum like that get housed? Because we actually don't have a required course called sustainability or environmental change. I mean, we have some elective courses, but not all students take it. And I think it is content that's really important. And so our approach has been, we can develop units and try to put a unit on climate change or sustainability into a required course. And that way all kids will get it. But if it's not in the state standards, then it's something that we have to work with our teachers of each of those courses to get into the curriculum, right? There isn't a required course really that covers that topic. So as we're trying to meet that goal, how do we get climate education into our curriculum? That's just something we've been thinking about. We've had a group working on it, and we're doing sample lessons this year that we can give to teachers who teach. I mean, I think the obvious choice there is going to be maybe science teachers, maybe biology, chemistry, physics. We certainly have teachers in other departments that can touch on this topic too, but we're just trying to figure out how do you get really important content to all students if there's not a required course that requires they take it.
Thank you, Graham. Jennifer.
Yeah, so I was actually going to start with exactly the same thing that you said, Graham, that colleges very much dictate what happens in our high schools. But I have a sort of a little bit more of a negative or disappointed slant to it, in that a lot of the things we talked about today, we would like to see more of, right? I think that more civics education, more active listening, more understanding different perspectives, more financial literacy, we saw mentioned in there. A lot of that, I think a lot of us would like to see, and yet this race to college and the strongest transcript you can have and the highest GPA you can have makes it harder. When we talk about wellness, we talk about SEL classes, even just, I mean, I'm glad to know that in your district, Graham, some seniors are only taking 5 classes, or, you know, kids are only taking 5 or 6. I feel like a lot of our students are just taking 7 all the way through every year, because it's more credits, it's more weighted classes. It can get me into a better college. It feels like it's never enough. And anytime you try to get in one of these other things that feel like it's really important to be well-rounded, to be emotionally intelligent, to be ready to function in society in a productive way, it's hard because it's met with, but now you're making it harder for me to get into the college of my choice. So that is a little disappointing, and I would love, okay, it's a lot disappointing. I would love to find a way to better work with colleges to see if there are ways to tamp that down, right? They're getting tons of applicants, but they are graded by what is their yield, right? What's the lowest percentage rate of admission? And, you know, we just call those highly rejected schools, but kids are still striving for them a lot. So if we can get colleges to say, hey, you know what? If you've taken 3 APs and you've got a higher than a 3.9 GPA and you get X on your SAT, you would do fine at our school, and go ahead, apply. And it's gonna be a random lottery of all the kids that actually meet these requirements. That would take a lot of pressure off, because if you don't reach that, you just wouldn't apply. Or once you take 3 APs, if that lets you get into any of those schools, you don't have to take a 4th and a 5th and a 6th unless you're really interested in it, which is what APs in high school were supposed to be for way back when. If you're really passionate about environmental science, here's APES. If you're really passionate about US history, here's AP US history. But now there's a lot of kids that take all of them, and it leaves no room for this other stuff. And any attempt to add that stuff in gets pushed back. You're actually harming my child's chances of getting into the college they want to. So that's sort of my negative bent on it. But I think that if we are all thinking about equity and expertise when all these decisions are made and all these conversations happen, I think it's a good starting point, some good guiding principles. And I'm really grateful that we had this conversation, and hope it continues in each of our school districts. And thank everybody who came in to listen to it and be a part of it. And I hope you all go back to your own districts and advocate for this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate that.
I want to
Manuel.
acknowledge the League of Women Voters for having organized our conversation and put it together. And I really appreciate having been invited to be a part of this. Decades ago, there was a book called Future Shock. And, you know, it was basically compared to the society of 1950s, early 1960s. Suddenly we were in the throes of social, political, you know, changes that were turning some worlds upside down. And I believe we're now in an age of like future shock squared. Everything is changing everywhere we turn, everywhere we look. And education, sooner or later, has to reflect what our students are needing in order to be a part of their communities and a part of a global world, a global village. So it's really important to have our community take an interest in our educational process and to bring their perspectives. And so conversations like this are helpful. And I'll close by saying I must enjoy this because I never set out to do it, but I'm in my 34th year as a member of the Board of Trustees for the Eastside Union High School District. And I've announced more than once that I was stepping down, you know, and each time, you know, people persuade me saying it's not the time for you to, you know, to go. But I do love this. I don't love being a part of public conversations and conversations that are about our children and our future. And again, much appreciation to the League of Women Voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Marianne.
Well, I want to thank everybody who's here, and we have just a couple people have just joined, but our fantastic speakers sharing a lot of very personal experiences and opinions with the rest of the community. And as you know, this is being recorded, and we will make the link available both to the participants as well as to our panelists, as well as on our websites. And this is the county website. And anybody who wants to view it will have that link available. I am blown away by you guys. And I'd like to have part 2 of this conversation with a whole different set of topics, which we may well have a whole different set of topics after a few more months. But don't be surprised if we invite you to another session. And the interaction that you showed was fantastic. Thank you again. I'd also like to thank my co-people and my team, Ellen Forbes, Ellen Forbes, Tony Staber, Karen Kalinsky, Carol Watts, and our participants on the school boards, the staffs and the teachers in all of the areas who, as a former teacher, I know how hard you guys work. And it is a blessing that you give, sharing your wisdom and your experience and your skills to the rest of the community. As well, I want to thank parents and students. And those students work pretty darn hard too. So I will end with a wonderful big thank you for everybody and an open invitation to be welcome again to continue with this conversation. The ideas you shared here were extremely valuable to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.